All right, so we are now officially live. Hello, everyone. This is Mnar Adley. I am the founder and director of MintPress News. I am testing out a new camera today, so it might look a little awkward because it's over there, but I hope it doesn't cause any hiccups for us. So welcome to today's MintPress team live stream. I am joined by Lowkey. He's an activist rapper and host of the MintPress podcast, The Watchdog. We're also joined by Alan MacLeod. He is our senior staff writer and investigative journalist. He also produces the Mintcast podcast. And so we have a lot to talk about in deconstructing Israel's propaganda machine. And before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that our YouTube channel has been completely demonetized recently. And we would greatly appreciate any sort of financial support from our viewers and from our readers. If you can become a member of our Patreon for as little as $5 a month, we'd greatly appreciate it. So, we have been watching in horror for the last 2 weeks what Israel is doing in Gaza, and it's far worse than we had expected. The Gaza Health Ministry released an updated number of the death toll in Gaza. It jumped from about 5,000 people 2 days ago to over 7,000 Palestinians dead. Thousands have been injured and over 1 million people have been left homeless. There are over 2,000 people still stuck under the rubble and not enough equipment or the tools to get them out. Israel is bombing everything in sight. Making it very hard for Palestinians to take cover and hide from Israel's bombs. Millions of people around the world have taken to the streets. They have spoken very loudly and clearly to demand a ceasefire. And yet the leaders of the so-called free world, from Joe Biden, from Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron, and Ursula von der Leyen, and the war-hungry crony corporate media are all abetting Israel's well-documented genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. At the UN, the US, Britain, and France voted no for a ceasefire in the past week, and instead have reiterated their unequivocal support for apartheid Israel. In the middle of this slaughter, the Biden administration just voted yesterday, or just proposed a bill to have Congress vote to send Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan billions of dollars worth of aid. I actually attended a protest here in Minneapolis where protesters from the anti-war committee and anti-war activists from the state and abroad joined a sit-in at many congressional people's office here in Minneapolis to ensure that they vote no. But despite how tragic the events are that have unfolded, Israel is losing the information war. And the Israel lobby groups, and there are Israel lobby groups that are working with big tech, with corporate media to control the narrative and flag content critical of Israel. Today, MintPress uploaded an explainer that I did, which broke down all of the war crimes Israel is committing in Gaza according to the International Criminal Court. And Meta took it down. It was up for less than 2 minutes, and we were unfortunately unable to share this video on Meta. And I just want to share the post here from my Twitter page. So 1 second. And so Instagram and Facebook denied us from posting this video here where I break down all of the war crimes that Israel has committed so far in Gaza, and including the crime of genocide. And the reasoning that Instagram gave us is that it violates their community guidelines of supporting dangerous individuals. And I just find this message to be very ironic, considering that the ones that are dangerous that we are exposing is the Israeli state that is raining hell on Gaza and is committing egregious war crimes and crimes against humanity, which are the ones that I documented in this video. And not only is this anti-Palestinian racism, but it's an attack against journalism. But this goes in line with big tech's relationship with the state of Israel. Meta is a company that has deep links with the state of Israel. An example of this is Emmy Palmore, who sits on Facebook's oversight board, the group that ultimately decides the direction that Facebook takes, what content to promote, and what to suppress. Palmore is the former general director of the Israeli Ministry of Justice. In that role, she created a so-called Internet Referral Unit, which would push Facebook to delete Palestinian content that the Israeli government objected to. And now she helps call the shots at the world's most influential social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram. And so the deep relationship between Israel and these big tech giants is very, very vast. We probably won't have time to go over it, but if you've been following MintPress and the really important work of Lowkey and Alan MacLeod, you would have heard about this. So something that I want to go right into is, we can talk about, big tech censorship more. But something that has caught everybody's attention this week is Lowkey's appearance on Piers Morgan, and we were pretty proud to see the appearance on Piers Morgan because it was it really showcased just how much propaganda had to be pushed through and to break through, and I think Lowkey did a really great job of that. So I'm going to play the first clip. Or actually, before we do that, Kareem, do you want to talk about your experience going on the show, and then we can play the clip?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think it was a necessary experience. It was something that I think hopefully will reach a large amount of people. And, it is rare that I am in a position, or any of us are in a position where we are able to speak to that amount of people about the Palestinian cause. Unfortunately, it was after a very thick sandwich of Mark Regev and, of course, David Petraeus, the former head of the CIA and at one point head of US forces in Iraq. So there was a lot of propaganda that preceded the interview with me. And it did obviously take place in a hostile environment where the interviewer is essentially trying to irrationalize you and your point of view and trying to put you in a outside the realms of decency and logic in the way that they construct the questioning. That's not something that I think I'm unfamiliar with, and I knew that would be the case. I knew that would happen. But it was a something that I think was a necessary evil, really, at that time in order to reach that amount of people. So, yeah.
Get your popcorn ready.
What was that?
I said, get your popcorn ready, everyone.
Yep. All right, so let's play the first clip where you are talking right after David Petraeus and Israeli Ambassador Mark Regev.
Let me say something. I completely agree with you about the plight of the Palestinian people. I've tweeted about this for the last 2 weeks.
No, to be fair, you haven't, Piers, and this is not journalism. Shireen Abu
Aqla
was journalism. Yasser Murtaja was journalism. Mu'taz Azaiza, that's journalism. Palestinians are reaching out from the cage that Israel has put them in, and they are trying to speak to the world. And they are being met. They are being met with cold indifference. And I would say to you, Piers, to you that gentleman that you've just had on the show, Mark Regev, he belongs in The Hague. David Petraeus, Piers, you made your reputation as opposing the invasion of Iraq. Well, I would ask you, journalist to journalist, how could you justify the interview you just gave to the head of US forces in that illegal occupation of Iraq that David Petraeus led? He was then the head of the CIA. Both of the individuals that you have just had on this show deserve to be in The Hague tried for war crimes. I am not anything like them. I have not hurt a fly. Those two men have. Why are they given the respectability that you gave them with your interview? And why am I interrogated as if I am somehow someone that could hurt a human being?
Well, certainly in Mark Regev's case, I pushed him hard on all the positions Israel
That wasn't
is currently.
Incredible. I think a lot of people that were watching, they had their jaws dropped because, I mean, you called out Piers Morgan and all of corporate media for that sake. When talking about what's happening in Gaza, they bring on literal war criminals who are the ones that are dropping bombs and committing war crimes in Gaza. And it's just business as usual. And when they bring on anybody to talk about the plight of the Palestinians, they interrogate them in a way as if they are the criminals. And so we've watched and heard Piers Morgan over and over again say, I'm the broadcaster that brings on the most pro-Palestinian voices. And while there is a little bit of truth to that, he does allow for that perspective on there, it is sandwiched with a lot of propaganda. So tell us how, before these two gentlemen came on, before you came on, what were you hearing Piers and these two gentlemen talk about before you came on?
So the show was being filmed in New York, and both of them were joining the show via Skype. And I had come into the building and been informed by an employee that they had been banned from wearing the Palestinian flag badge. And so, I was aware of the surroundings for the interview. I know that I was on a Murdoch-owned station. I know that I was about to enter into a space where I was not going to be considered essentially a rational actor. So I sort of had to justify myself. So I was, I have to be honest, getting ready. I was getting ready. But ultimately, I knew that this is nothing. This is not real. This is sort of manufactured, socially constructed anxiety, but also none of this is real. And also in the grand scheme of things, this is not going to change what we need to change. So I was sort of aware of all those things, dicing with those things, but also I was thinking to myself, I definitely wanted to make key points, and I also wanted the audience, however many that would be, to at least be exposed to some of the truth of what was happening. Because what I found really with Mark Regev and David Petraeus is, I think it's actually George Orwell, unfortunately, who said it was something about the use of language to beautify violent policies. And I felt that very strongly with Regev and David Petraeus, that they dress up what are immensely destructive actions to other people's lives in some type of respectability. And unfortunately, that's facilitated, and Piers Morgan is not actually unique in his way of being. This is a uniform thing across the British and US media, and it's actually an implicit rule of being in that club. If you don't interrogate, across this war on terror period, if you don't interrogate Muslims when you interview them, essentially, then, especially when it's about foreign policy, then it's rare that you'll get into that club in the first place. And I do think during this period, we've seen some people push against that rule. So we've seen some of the employees of Sky News and BBC sometimes push the Israelis quite hard, but you do also see them back off quite a bit. And, we are aware that there was the case of the BBC journalist when she asked, I think Naftali Bennett it was, if Israel wanted to kill children, or was the Israeli military okay with the killing of children? And she ended up having to apologize. The BBC had to apologize. So we're in a very intense media sphere. But one of the great things I would say about social media is that while It's very much a carefully curated space of we're seeing accounts get deleted, etc., etc. It at least has the potential for us to see perspectives and then also gauge the extent to which those other perspectives are popular. And I think the interesting thing about someone like Piers Morgan is, in contrast to other media figures, he has his ear to the street to some extent, or he has his ear to the algorithm to some extent, where he's seeing the type of things that are picking up traction online. He's thinking, okay, well, this is an existing sort of constituency of people, and he has some type of openness to at least getting them on and interrogating them. You know, throughout this period, I've of course not been asked on any mainstream media platform other than that. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience.
And I don't expect you will be asked on many other platforms after that, honestly. And what we've seen is, as you were saying, with these platforms, they are very tightly controlled. And if the heads of these platforms have any inkling that something awry might happen, they just pull their anchors off the air. We saw MSNBC, for example, just take 3 Muslim anchors, including Mehdi Hassan and Ari Velshi, just yank them off the air when the Al-Aqsa flood started. Why? Because they feared that Hassan and Velshi and the other Muslim anchors would perhaps have a different perspective of what was going on. And we're seeing that very closely in all of these polls that are coming out. You see support for a ceasefire and sympathy for Palestinians among Western publics. When you look at the age breakdown, age 65 and plus are all with Israel, are all very unsympathetic to the Palestinians. But when you look at people under 35, under 40, the exact opposite is going on. And I think that's really what we're seeing is where you get your media coverage from. If you get it mostly from social media, like young people do, they are at least seeing a different side and they're making their own mind up about it. But if you're relying on corporate media, if you still read newspapers or watch cable news, you're getting one opinion, really, and that's pretty much going from CNN on the left to Fox News on the right. It's that Israel must have as much weapons as it wants, pretty much unlimited support. Too bad that Palestinians are dying, but they should have condemned Hamas a bit more. And that's pretty much the story that's going on. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the US or Europe. We've seen a spate of European journalists fired for pro-Palestine sympathies, and we're also seeing people in all sorts of influential jobs in public life also being fired for their sympathies as well.
And I just want to play one more clip from that segment. So let me get this here. Oops. We're gonna share this.
I have to say, Piers, that actually this line of questioning, unfortunately, on a personal level, is somewhat hypocritical, and I'll explain why. On April 18th, 2022, you said the exact phrase that you feel like Nelson Mandela walking out of prison on the long road to freedom of speech. Today, there is a statue for Nelson Mandela outside Parliament. Now, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Beit Salim, and even the Harvard Law School have said that Israel practices apartheid against the Palestinian people. Do you know what the ANC struggle against apartheid entailed? Are you aware that the ANC are believed to have very unfortunately, horrifically, and terribly taken the lives of children and civilians in their struggle against apartheid? So, Piers, you seem absolutely content to not only compare yourself to Nelson Mandela, who served 27 years in jail for what they described as terrorism at the time, but yet you cannot see what the vast majority of human rights organizations in the world see when they look at the Palestinians. When you look at UN Resolution 194, paragraph 11, the Palestinians have the right to return home. Almost a million of them were displaced in 1948 with the foundation of the State of Israel. And what we are now on the brink of is Palestinians, millions of them, being driven into the Sinai desert with help of the US Delta Force,
Yeah, but Lowkey,
with help
let me
of the
jump in.
British.
Incredible. Yeah.
Maybe Piers Morgan's struggles are not quite comparable to Nelson Mandela's. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about it is that it was actually now, I would say, the clashing between fake cancel culture and real cancel culture. And a point that I did not make that I wish I had is that for somebody who the real byline of his show is anti-cancel culture, we're standing up against cancel culture. You have no people in modern history more comprehensively cancelled than the Palestinians. And for somebody like him who uses it as a unique selling point for his show, his refusal of cancel culture, it's quite interesting to directly be involved in, you know, while he'd say he's not cancelling them, he's giving them a platform, but he's trying to cancel you once he gets you on there. I was very aware that once I was on there, he was going to try and cancel you. And the type of cancelling that he's trying to deliver to you could entail criminal prosecution at this stage. It could entail the ruining of your life. It could entail losing a job. That's the type of cancelling that he's trying to carry out on you through this show. And he's not unaware of the context, you know. He's also not unaware of the changes, the legal changes and stuff like that. It seems like Mnar's camera has malfunctioned. So me and you, Alan, may have to take the floor. But what do you think of that? Do you see what I mean, Alan, when I'm talking about the sort of manufactured cancel culture against what is a really existing cancel culture?
Oh, yeah. Listen, if the past couple of weeks has told us anything, it's told us that all of these people who have made their careers talking about, you know, oh, I say the things that people are too afraid to say, oh, you can't cancel me, we have to have free speech, etc., have been just exposed as complete and utter hypocrites, which really shouldn't have been necessary, frankly, because some of them have very dodgy pasts. I'm thinking about people like Barry Weiss, who really, you know, sat on a platform of, you know, we have to have, you know, open debate about all these important issues, and we can't cancel people and silence people for their voices. She was basically talking about, you know, pushing far-right ideas into the public sphere. But she got her start trying to cancel Palestinian professors when she was at university. So, you know, frankly, it was always just a complete and utter joke from, you know, to begin with. Or somebody like Dave Rubin, who talks about how, you know, the left has lost itself on free speech and, you know, what happens to liberal ideas, etc. You know, when he saw that France was banning pro-Palestine protests, Dave Rubin said, oh, maybe the West can save itself, actually. So, frankly, yeah, this has always been the case that, you know, people on the right complain about being cancelled. But the fact that anybody even hears them is kind of proof in itself that they're not truly being cancelled. People who are actually being cancelled are ones that are getting taken off the air quietly, and nobody comes to their aid. Nobody writes big columns about it in the New York Times and the Washington Post, because there's no big think tanks pushing those sorts of ideas. And so ultimately, it's the people who don't have power, don't have much of a voice, who get stamped on and silenced. Those are the real victims of cancel culture, if there is such a thing. But ultimately, we never focus on them.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, my camera, my nice camera that I thought would keep going for the the live stream has turned off, and I can't get it to turn it back on. So I'm back to using my old webcam. So one of the things that you mentioned, Lowkey, is kind of the framing, the way that they set up the questions. And I think what was really cool about your answer is that you flipped the script, because he really wanted, every single Palestinian or Palestinian voice that comes on his show, he starts it with the same question, which is, will you condemn the Hamas terror attacks of October 7th? Which is really, the kind of propaganda framing and cornering and interrogation that Palestinians face when talking about the events in Gaza, as if we have to as if, that is the starting point. October 7th is the starting point of this conversation, not over 75 years of occupation, not 75 years of apartheid, not 75 years of ethnic cleansing and genocide. And I think, was there one more clip? I think that was it for the clips. But yeah, you totally flipped the script on Piers and really schooled him on the situation in Palestine. So I think a lot of people appreciated that and commend you for that. And as a Palestinian, of course, I really appreciate what you've said and done for Palestine on his show. And it's unfortunate that, the media is really stuck on October 7th, when in reality, we actually don't know all of the details about what happened on, or not September 11th, excuse me, October 7th. We really don't know all of the details of October 11th. And in fact, we're working on a video explainer to break down what we do know that has happened on October 7th. Let's see here. Alan, let's talk about your latest investigation. I'm struggling to get a link to appear here. So if you just want to start talking about your latest investigation that has to do with more censorship and media propaganda framing when it comes to coverage of Palestine.
Did you want me to talk about the latest one that's called Propaganda War? Pro-Israel trolls are mobbing Twitter's community notes. Is that right?
Yes, I finally got it up.
Well, that's what it's called. It's called Propaganda War. Pro-Israel trolls are mobbing Twitter's community notes. And it's really going through how just as important to the actual military war that's going on, to Israel anyway, is the battle for public opinion. And in that, it is actually concentrating a heck of a lot of resources, diverting huge amounts of money and huge amounts of time and energy to trying to manipulate and influence the online argument. Some of this, for example, includes spending more than $7 million on ads in the past 2 weeks on YouTube alone. That equates to around 1 billion impressions, so 1 billion ads seen. And where is Israel actually focusing its attention? It's not really focusing it on a worldwide audience, because ultimately it knows where the important publics are. And the largest countries that they're focusing on are the United States, Germany, France, the UK, and Belgium. And so ultimately, they're trying to convince publics in Western Europe and North America to support them, because ultimately they know that those are the countries that they have to influence, because they've lost Asia, they've lost Africa, they've lost Latin America. All they've got are the NATO countries, ultimately. Israel's also been spending big. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been spending big, launching dozens of advertising campaigns across Twitter, or X as it's called. They're also spending money putting ads on online games apps, and also language apps like Duolingo, as well as all the big social media places like Instagram, etc. A lot of this advertising is pretty on the nose. I think you might be able to play a clip of one of the adverts that is actually being played right now in front of videos aimed at children. Do you have that up there, Mnar?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an ad that was being played on YouTube, and it is aimed at the parents of very young children.
What the fuck?
Just so we are aware, where's the text here? 40 infants were murdered in Israel, and this goes back to the very famous, now retracted story by CNN that was pushed out, that was sourced from I-24 News, where Israel, one of the atrocities, the alleged atrocities to justify Israel's war against Gaza, is the fact that Hamas apparently beheaded 40 babies when they attacked Israel, and that story turned out to be fake.
Yeah, and not only that, Israel has released a long list of hundreds of fatalities during the fighting, and none of them are actually infants. There's zero there's zero children under 3 years old there. That doesn't mean that no infants were killed, but it is suspicious that after nearly 3 weeks of fighting, that the Israelis have not come forward and actually named any young children that have been killed in this fighting. So I think that further undermines that sort of 40 beheaded babies trope that was going around.
Go ahead.
Keep going.
I was going to say it's important to note that, you know, Joe Biden went on national TV and was watched by not just American audiences, but the world over. Billions of people watched him say that he personally saw videos of beheaded babies and photos of beheaded babies. And then the White House had to retract that statement, that he had not seen that. Even now, the Israeli military has distanced itself from that allegation.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that Israel or its supporters have been trying to do is trying to brigade and trying to overwhelm this new community notes feature on Twitter, which allows people who sign up for it to add notes underneath popular or not even popular tweets, trying to add clarification to things. It was an attempt to battle fake news, and I think it was in good faith that they tried this. But ultimately, because it's free for anyone to sign up, it does mean that people with an agenda can go in there, and especially if they are organized, they can really take over that function. And so what we've seen in the past couple of weeks is pretty much any pro-Palestine tweet that goes up that shows Israel in a negative light, there will be dozens and dozens of community notes trying to get stickied to these tweets that go viral, which try to undermine the message of what's going on. It's happened to all three of us, even on some of your tweets, Mnar. I saw one that had only 19 likes when I saw it, and it already had a community note on it, which really leads me to believe, like, who is looking at this? It's almost like they're monitoring you and trying to, like, just stamp out anything you say almost to begin with. And this really reminds me of what pro-Israel groups like, I think it's called the Yesha Council, used to do in the 2010s, and I probably still do, frankly, which is really just join Wikipedia en masse and then try to manipulate and rewrite all sorts of pages in the encyclopedia to have as much of a pro-Israel bent as possible. In fact, the council, it's well known, it's been reported, even has prizes for the people who edit the most articles. You know, if you edit a few thousand, you get a balloon ride up in the sky, stuff like that. So there's a lot of money going behind this, and they realize this because people are online now, and the battle for public opinion is, for Israel, very, very important, because ultimately, despite the fact that they do have overwhelming military power, they still are relying almost completely on the consent of the big European and specifically the United States governments to be able to do this kind of thing. One phone call from Joe Biden, and this would all end. And we should really remember that, because just because Israeli jets are actually doing the striking of these Palestinian villages, a lot of these bombs are being made in the USA. And as I said, the US absolutely has the power to stop this whenever it wants.
I want to show this Politico article, and both you and Lowkey can comment on this, because part of one of my explainers that I did was actually talking about how Politico takes directives from the Israeli government and has told its employees through a memo that they have to support Israel or they'll be fired. And so here we have this article from Politico, and I don't know when this was published today. Okay, guys,
Yeah.
this makes it even more interesting. So Israel is acting proportionately against a terrorist enemy. Now, this is not even the really bad part. The really, really bad part is the first line of this article that states, before the bodies of the 40 Jewish babies massacred by Hamas were even buried. So it's still leading with a lie that has been retracted by the establishment. Like, this story is not even real, and it's the first line of this article. And of course, the reason why I wanted to share that was not because of this line, but I just noticed that now. But it's also the title here: Israel is acting proportionately against a terrorist enemy. Of course, you know, it's painting this as a Israel versus Hamas war, when the majority of people who have been killed, now 7,000 people, are civilians. They are civilians. 50% of the population of Gaza are children. They're people that are under the age of 18. I mean, all of the babies and children that I have seen dead, which anybody can now see on social media, what did they have to do with Hamas? And that's the dehumanization that we're seeing. So, Alan, do you want to talk about the directive that Politico received from its, I think it has a German owner that received the original directive from the Israeli government?
Yeah, that's right. Axel Springer is the company that owns Politico. It's a huge media conglomerate in Europe. It owns so much of the German language newspapers and media here. And Axel Springer explicitly requires its staff to sign what amounts to a loyalty oath to three organizations: the Transatlantic Alliance, is what they call it, which means NATO basically, the European Union, and to the expansionist policies of the State of Israel. So basically all the employees in Europe have to sign this. It's not clear whether the United States employees have to sign this, but frankly, if that's what your parent company is urging in one part of the world, people get the message and know what's going on. That article is egregious for many reasons. One of the reasons I would say is that it's written by Arsen Ostrovsky, who is ostensibly a human rights lawyer. That's how he presents himself. But just a few days ago, he was tweeting one of the most racist images ever seen on Twitter, which was an Israeli boot stamping out a Palestinian who was presented as a cockroach. So that's the sort of person Ostrovsky is. He's also perhaps most well known in different circles previously for being one of the loudest voices trying to cancel Roger Waters for wearing a Nazi suit during his performances, something that he's been doing for, I believe, 40 years now, but only in the past few months has apparently become a problem and apparently become problematic. Anybody who sees that show knows that it's an anti-fascist message and that he's playing a character. But that doesn't matter when you're clipping something for 5 seconds and trying to take it out of context and trying to get venues to ban Waters and people like him. So yeah, this is what Ostrovsky is like, and the entire piece is just awful, you know, talking about reacting when in fact you could say actually this conflict didn't start on October 7th. And how on earth is it proportional to just carpet bomb one of the world's most densely populated cities, killing thousands of people, making 1.35 million people homeless, and that figure is probably going to keep rising. Is this really the way that, you know, some sort of democratic nation is supposed to act? I don't think so. What do you think, Lowkey?
I think the truly scary thing about the period of time we're in now is that what Israel wants to do to Gaza is move 2 million people into Egypt. Now, that's a bigger population displacement than took place during the Nakba. And bear in mind, before the Nakba, through the British and the Israelis and home demolitions and ethnic cleansing, 400,000 Palestinians had already been displaced across that period before the Nakba, the decades before the Nakba. But the Nakba started in 47 and ended in 49. We are less than a month into something that Israel is claiming will take 2 to 3 months. They have the US Delta Force with them. They have a British spy plane above Gaza helping them, probably with logistics and targeting, even in their strikes. Why else would a British spy plane be there? What exactly are the British adding to this situation? So we have a British and US intervention to aid Israel in a war against a non-state actor that primarily consists of bombing civilian targets in a concentration camp of 2 million people. Now, here's the thing. The US have built up around 8,000, 9,000 troops around the region off the back of this war. They are accompanying Israel. Bear in mind that you had Douglas MacArthur come out and say that our special forces tried to enter Gaza 2 days ago and got shot to shreds. Now, the report is that around 20 Israeli tanks tried to enter Gaza by land and were repelled. Now, in the case that we're talking about now, the US is building up its forces because Israel is trying to turn this, not only with its maximalist strategy, which we have seen again and again and again, it's attempting to turn this into the displacement of 2 million people. So it's trying to get the international community to foot the bill and build tent cities. That is the exact words that Israeli officials have used. Tent cities for Palestinians in Gaza, in the Sinai desert. And on the other side, the danger is that the resistance, the axis of resistance will be fully activated. All US bases will become targets, as they are being targeted. And also, like I say, Israel wants to push the US into regime change in Iran. Now, China has a commitment to invest $400 billion in the Iranian economy over the next 10 to 20 years. When the Israelis bombed and destroyed Halab and Damascus airports, Iran were then landing their planes on Russian bases and air carriers. So while Russia and China would advocate for a ceasefire in terms of Gaza, they obviously would not intervene to help the Palestinians. But to believe that the US could use this to launch regime change in a country the size of Iran, with the international relations that Iran has with other states, it would certainly involve China and Russia. And so these idiots in our media, these idiots with what is a sort of a latent genocidal impulse, you know, one of the things that I think went, unfortunately, largely unexamined from the war on terror years was the way in which the very logic that Israel is using was actually used by us on a larger scale. The idea that some thousands of people died in our country then justified wars of invading other countries and causing the death of over 1 million people. And essentially, as societies, we are okay with that. We're okay with that logic. We're okay with the logic that you pinch me and I chop up your whole body and kill your whole family, basically. Because that's, as a state actor, that's what Britain and the US did as part of the war on terror. You know, it was genocide. It was a genocidal war. We've got so many aspects of our foreign policy which is actually genocidal. The sanctions on Iraq were genocidal. The sanctions right now in Afghanistan, genocidal. The wars against these societies doesn't mean they are genocide. It means they are genocidal, because you're literally taking away people's ability as a group of people to live. And unfortunately, we forgot that our media class were basically okay with that. They didn't have a problem with that. The only difference for some of us is that we're here. If we were there, our death could easily be justified as a just tick on a piece of paper, as a small little digit on a piece of paper. And so I think that has been quite a challenge, sort of getting my head around that and being like, oh, okay, well, I've tried to sort of see yourself as part of this country's history, as part of the society, but ultimately the status quo position is that your life is expendable and your death could be justified. And it's you know, you're looking at it happening in Gaza, and on one hand, you're seeing that, you're learning about Britain's role in it, but our society is deeply undisturbed by this. It's completely undisturbed by it, and people are not particularly moved. While we're seeing the demonstrations, I'm not seeing any tangible change coming from the demonstrations. I mean, I guess there's the expression of solidarity with Palestine in the streets is important, especially at a time when they're trying to criminalize a lot of that stuff. But still, this has been an absolutely terrible time for all of us. I'm sure all three of us on this live stream and many of the people that are tuned in have seen hundreds of things that we wish we never saw throughout this period, and felt a sort of level of impotence that none of us have ever felt before, really, and an inability to assert any type of agency.
I mean, it is true that real change happens when a mass amount of people in society rise up and take direct action to make that change. And there have been moments where I personally have felt a little helpless, but then I remember that it is the ripple effects that we are creating that later turn into waves. And that's how major change is usually made. And we cannot underestimate our voice. Lowkey, your voice is so important. Alan's investigations, extremely, extremely important. Our platform as an independent media outlet is extremely important. And I will just speak on behalf of myself. I've had very intense conversations with people who, their complicity in what the mainstream media is saying is disturbing. But also I've received messages from people who I've not interacted with or seen in over 20 years from high school, who remembered me talking about Gaza in high school. I'm 36 years old right now. That was a long time ago. Just heard from them this week for the first time. And they said, because of you and what you said in high school, I'm looking at the news now in complete horror and disgust at the media. It's because of what you said and what you taught me and what you presented in our classroom that I'm able to understand what our government is doing. And so we can't underestimate the impact that we're making. Sometimes in the mere present moment, we can't see it, but sometimes later on, years from now, we see the impact. And the truth is, as we touched on this, is that Israel is losing the information war. And that's why they're clamping down and pushing out this egregious amount of propaganda. And they are targeting journalists. I believe Israel has now targeted over 20 journalists in Gaza, apart from working directly with big tech giants to clamp down on our ability to share information here in the West. Yesterday, Israel targeted the home of Wael al-Dahdouh. He's the chief correspondent for Al Jazeera based in Gaza. They killed his wife, they killed his children, and they killed his grandson. And so it's disturbing the way that Israel is trying to send a message to the messengers in targeting their families and murdering them. And I want to just bring attention, Lowkey, at the end of your talk with Piers Morgan, you gave a huge shout out to Mu'taz Azaiza. He is an independent journalist based in Gaza, and we've actually worked directly with Mu'taz. He's filmed an entire documentary for MintPress, Gaza Fights Back, which you guys can find on our website. We can link it in the comments. And he made a call here to protect his life by the international community because Israel is deliberately targeting journalists. And for everybody watching, Mu'taz went from 20,000 followers on Instagram to now almost 8 million followers just from his live streams of walking through the streets of Gaza and literally just live streaming with his camera, just showing the death and destruction. I mean, he's filmed himself holding dead babies at funerals, at burials. He's showing how people don't have electricity. He's walked us through the hospitals in Gaza that are about to collapse if they haven't already. He's been at, every massacre scene. And he says in this post here that he did not ask for that many followers. He didn't ask for this kind of, he didn't ask for all of this attention. He's saying, please, I'm asking for international protection right now. If something happens to me, I will never forgive anyone who was able to stop this madness, war, and didn't. For TV channels, Mu'taz is not a content for you. What is happening is not a content to collect interactions. So please stop texting and calling me for interviews. There's no more to say or to clarify for the people than what I have witnessed and captured. Yesterday, I saw the correspondent of Al Jazeera when he lost his whole family. And believe me or not, I was going to delete everything here. I don't want to lose more for just showing the world. That's not a surrender post, but I just want to be clear that I'm an independent photographer who is covering what is going on in Gaza and not related to any media, militant group, or anything else. What you are all watching, I'm covering it for my own, and Mu'taz is not a hero. He's just a photographer who dreamed. Can't read this anymore. Sorry, guys. Trying to hold it together. What you are all watching is I'm covering it not for my own, and Mu'taz is not a hero. He's just a photographer who dreamed to travel the world and share the stories from the different globe, and for his bad luck, the dream could not come true. Mu'taz is asking for an international protection. I'm so sorry, guys. Mu'taz is a friend of mine. I've been communicating with him for over 2 years. He helped us film our documentary in Gaza. His heart is a heart of gold. He's never asked for money. He's never asked for anything except for to speak, to share the stories of the people of Gaza. And every day I watch his live streams, and every day I watch his videos, and he's drenched in blood. He's drenched in dust from the rubble. He is trying to carry the burden of the trauma of the people of Gaza. He's trying to make the children laugh in the hospitals. He's trying to entertain them. And I believe that there's a target on his back. I believe that, and it's of course not just him, but all the people of Gaza. But now that he's amassed such a huge following, he will become a target. I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry for just bursting out in tears. But, this line at the end of his post where he says, he is just a photographer who dreamed to travel the world and share the stories from different parts of the globe. And for his bad luck, the dream could not come true. And what he's referring to is that he wasn't able to step out of Gaza. I don't know. You guys want to say something? Yeah. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, listen. As far as I'm aware, it's now 24 journalists in Palestine who've been killed in Israeli attacks. As you said, the Al Jazeera Gaza bureau chief, his family, was killed in an attack recently. He believes that was a targeted attack on his family for his live reports from Gaza. He said, and I've got a quote from him here. He said, "They seek revenge through our children," is what he said. And of course, these attacks are not happening in a vacuum. These attacks actually come shortly after the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, instructed Al Jazeera, the chiefs of Al Jazeera, or instructed Qatar to tell Al Jazeera to tone down their coverage of Israel's attacks or face consequences, which really goes to show quite a lot how the world actually works when there are phone calls from the United States that can be made like that. And of course, this isn't the first time that Israel and its US backer has deliberately targeted news networks, including Al Jazeera, of course. Last year, Israeli forces shot the legendary anchor Shireen Abu Akleh. She was shot in the head. And then, of course, the Israelis, they denied it for a long time. They said it wasn't them. It eventually came out clearly that it was. Not only that, they broke up her funerals. They were beating the people who were carrying her body. And so this is, part of a long history of attacking journalists. And we can even go back to the United States in Iraq when they attacked Al Jazeera as well. So this is just, the price that often gets paid in these things. There are no targets that are sacred. We've seen places of worship destroyed, medical facilities destroyed. We've seen schools attacked, and we've also seen journalists attacked as well. I mean, I don't know, do you want to jump in here, Lowkey, and say something about this?
Yeah, Israel has a history of targeting journalists. Even before this war, it was estimated to have killed around 55 journalists over the last few decades. Some of them have even included citizens of other countries, like James Miller, for example. Obviously, prominent case with Yasser Murtaja, wearing the press on his chest when he was shot during the Great March of Return of 2018, trying to practice their right under UN Resolution 194, Article 11. And Israel, of course, stopped them. Unfortunately, we don't see in the mainstream media anything reported about the Great March of Return and that attempt to peacefully return to
I think
their
there was
home.
like 50,000 people too who came out to march.
Yeah, huge numbers, and a huge thousands of people were had their knees shot off and were amputated. This is a really vicious fascist regime that we are struggling against, and we cannot and we must not lose hope and lose sight of what we are trying to do. History will absolve us of anything they accuse us of, and we have to keep that in mind. I'm not sure if we have anything else to discuss. There's a lot more coming out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing, if that's okay. Our voices and our actions and our protests can't end when the ceasefire happens. We have to remember that we live under a system that is fascist, whether it's the liberal or conservative politicians that rule over us. We have to stop abetting them from being our rulers in the political system, and we have to keep supporting independent politicians. And yeah, I mean, for us in the US, we have a two-party system that is hell-bent on ensuring that forever wars continue. And Israel's war against Palestinians and its occupation of Palestine, its apartheid system, is just fueling the military-industrial complex. It's the people at the very top, the executives at Lockheed Martin, at Raytheon, at General Dynamics. By the way, 3 weapons manufacturers that are based right here in Minneapolis. Those are the true winners of these wars. And so we have to become smarter. And I'm really, really impressed with everybody's ability to break through the propaganda machine that Israel is pushing out. I mean, if you look at the comment sections on the post from CNN and New York Times, and people are really able to see through the propaganda. And I hope that we can take that with us the next time our media starts to push another humanitarian war. We cannot continue to believe that there is such thing as a humanitarian war. Bombs are not dropped to save people. They are being dropped to kill people. And so let's take what we've learned from this current crisis in Gaza and our ability to break through all the propaganda and all of this lip service of human rights and democracy. And let's not let that fade, that energy that we have right now. Let's continue to use that every time the media tries to push another regime change war, tries to convince us that a government needs to be overthrown or that we need to send arms to some sort of rebels overseas. It's all the same. And so we really have to keep this energy going. And when a ceasefire is announced, which I hope will be soon, I hope that this ground invasion doesn't happen, but I also hope that Israel doesn't continue to drop these bombs. We have to remember that the fight for a free Palestine is not over. We have to continue to use our voice, our power, our platform to speak up for the people of Palestine, to end Israel's occupation of their land and the slaughter of the Palestinian people and the apartheid system that continues to this day, which I was in Jerusalem. I was in Palestine this summer, and I lived and saw that firsthand once again. I know that we are out of time, but did you guys want to have anything else to add? And I'm so sorry that I just burst out in tears. I think it was just like this accumulation of me trying to hold it together, and then it just came right out reading Mu'taz's words.
Well, talking about the media, if you do want to end on a lighter note, I've shared a little video. It's of a CNN clip, a live clip they tried to do in Palestine, in the West Bank, I think, and it didn't go quite as well as they expected. And it really goes to sort of, it kind of complements what you were talking about breaking through the propaganda, actually, Mnar. So
Okay, let's play this.
if you do want to play that, and
we can be done. I
you can
think
finish
it's a
there.
40-second video. 1 second.
Journalists gathered here because this is kind of where the clashes happens. So, all right.
You are genocide supporters. You are not welcome here. Genocide supporters. Fuck CNN. Fuck CNN. Genocide supporters.
All right, you see that people are very angry. They do not like the way in which that CNN has been reporting the story. You hear that, but we're fine. But what you are seeing is the heightened fear, anger, frustration with what's happening.
Well, of course, people are frustrated. That's Sarah Snyder, the CNN anchor, who took Netanyahu's word for it and led with the story and spread the fake story of the 40 beheaded babies. And then she later retracted that story. So there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, that's probably what should happen to all CNN reporters all the time. And I don't just mean in the ones in like the West Bank. I mean, if you see like a CNN segment doing something on like college football, that should be happening again for them as well. I mean, these people should be hounded and not being allowed to think that they should be, being allowed in polite society while their network continues to support mass slaughter.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the way to end this is, of course, to thank both of you, Lowkey and Alan MacLeod. Please, if everybody hasn't followed them, please follow them now. And we really appreciate everybody's support. I will link to our Patreon in the comments as soon as this live stream is over. So until next time, thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.